I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm soul-flaying and soul-slaying as we rank the bosses of Lords of the Fallen 2023, from worst to best. For this video, I'm specifically looking at what the game calls Colossal Bosses. When you visit a vestige, you can click Echoes of Battle, which will give the ability to refight major story bosses. This list of 12 are the ones in this video, as the rest are considered mini-bosses, elite fights, or NPC battles. If you're curious about those, let me know, I could consider making that video in the future. So be sure to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all my future videos, and let's jump right in. All 12 Lords of the Fallen 2023 bosses, ranked. Let me know your favourite down below. At number 12, we have Adir, the Bereft Exile, the final boss of the Radiance ending. From the very intro of the game, we are told that Adir is a monster, a god of the Inferno who must be kept sealed away lest he wreak havoc on the land of Mournstead and the greater world. The reality is that none of the gods and Lords of the Fallen are good. Adir is just the easiest to throw under the bus, but Aureus of the Radiant Sentinels is willing to completely nuke the world of his non-believers should you go for the Radiant ending. And after seeing the atrocities committed in his name, reminiscent of various religious crusades in the Middle Ages, you realize there is not a winning side. This world is very miserable, it's very blasphemous energy. Still, you're locked into the Radiance ending after you cleanse your first beacon, meaning you likely will have to face Adir. And his battle is the most disappointing final boss I have had the displeasure of facing in a long time. Adir monologues at you, aggressively, recounting his history and how his people, the Rogar, were villainized, claiming that Aureus is just as bad, and if you join Adir, you at least have a god that you can speak to, that you can influence. All the while, he's sending his power into random enemies throughout the arena that die in 3 hits. It's a Deacons of the Deep battle, where you kill the enemies with his power, watch his health bar go down, avoid some fire puddles that appear when you hit an opponent, and dodge a few annoying fireballs until Adir's health is completely spent. I don't mind when games decide to go cinematic for their final bosses, I'm cool with a story moment. But when Adir has been built up since the very start of the game, and technically we don't even get to fight him, it's a complete missed opportunity. This game touts itself as a Soulslike, but the gimmick of FromSoft's games is you get to kill pretty much everything and everyone in power. Elden Ring, you go through the whole royal lineage of Shardbearers. Dark Souls, you get to kill Gwyn. Dark Souls 3, the Lords of Cinder. Sekiro, you tear through Ashina's elites like it's nothing. Lords of the Fallen, you don't fight Adir. You don't fight Aureus, you don't fight the Putrid Mother. They miss the entire point of what makes the climaxes of these games so satisfying, and that's a real shame. At number 11, we have the Hollow Crow, the boss of Fife of the Chill Curse. This is a fight that I felt genuinely offended me as a player. When you arrive, you're greeted with this awesome crow creature within its nest. It looks badass, its colossal scale matches the type of fights you've gone through prior, and I was sitting there thinking, oh man, this is gonna be epic. Then a ghost girl appears, and the horror sets in as I realize, oh no, she's the boss, not the crow. Now, there is a rather tragic backstory for this pair, but I'm not terribly familiar with the lore of Lords of the Fallen, so I might get a few things off here. The crow is theorized to be York, the king of this frozen land, while the ghost girl Lucy is his drowned deceased niece, whom he went through countless trials to try and bring back to life. Ancient magical practices with shamans brought her back, but not in the way he intended, so eventually he locked her in a coffin and placed her beneath the beacon tower, which was a last-ditch effort to restore her glory. But with the beacons being affected by Adir's essence, she became a hostile ghost. Cold descended upon the land, creating the area we find today and dooming everyone that lived there. As for the boss fight, it's awful. I do not understand why Western developers are so intent on creating boss fights where you fight regular enemies for the entirety of the runtime. I was so sick of the Fife of the Chill Curse enemy roster by the time I reached this battle, so discovering that the entire fight was against just more regular enemies and Lucy the Ghost instead of this giant awesome crow, disappointment doesn't even begin to describe what I felt. You have to soulflay Lucy as she summons enemies, doing enough damage to eventually stun her and banish her. While this happens, you'll face off against an ever more annoying series of regular enemies, as well as a series of ice magic attacks summoned by the crow, like an ice vortex, ice shards, and ice paths along the floor. You can go into Umbral to attack Lucy without needing to soulflay, but that takes away your extra life should something go wrong, and also negates a lot of your healing. For me, what worked was putting fire damage onto my weapons via consumables, which allowed me to burn through most of the regular fodder enemies and the few elites that were spawned as well. That's 2 fights where we think we're facing one boss only to face regular enemies. Should have just called this fight Lucy the Drowned instead of the Hollow Crow, it would have felt more genuine. At number 10, we have the Congregator of Flesh, found at the end of the descent of Pilgrim's Perch. Crossing a wooden bridge towards the Forsaken Fen, we find the floor giving way beneath us, causing the player to tumble into a bloody cavern. Here we meet a horrific creature, a monster of gnashing teeth and multiple mouths, arms outstretched as he tries to consume. This is what's left of a preacher of the Hallowed Sentinels who believed himself to be the reincarnation of Aureus, their divine god. Of course, he was not, and was cast into this cavern from where he would never leave for his heresy. But rather than give up, he began to eat. Like Aldrich from Dark Souls 3, his voracious appetite caused him to devour every corpse thrown down into this pit until he became a creature of his own making, a monstrous entity whose only thought is to continue to feed. In battle, he reflects this by trying to grasp us with his sweeping hands and his many-layered mouths that wish to chomp us to bits. On top of this, he also has a poison mechanic, able to create poison clouds throughout the arena that you need to stay wary of lest you find yourself afflicted. I didn't find this fight to be terribly hard, though I do think the slow swings caught me off guard more than I cared to admit. He also has one move where he slides across the arena that I could never avoid for the life of me. I have no idea how to manage it even now. Once he reaches low health, he slams the ground a lot more and summons a ton of poison, ensuring that you'll likely be taking damage one way or another. But for an early game fight, I was pretty satisfied with how simple his moveset actually ended up being, able to take him down in just one attempt. While the bosses in this game aren't all particularly hard, most of them I beat in a couple of attempts, I appreciate that when they really try to go for it, they create fights that feel really interesting to look at. I just want a bit more mechanical depth, something I'd get from some entries later on today's list. At number 9, we have the Spurned Progeny, the boss guarding the path to Upper Calrath. This creature is the son of the former king and queen of Mornstead, though how he came to be is quite a horrific tale indeed, one that I don't think I'll go into here. But let it be known that this creature has the mind of a young child. He's not this deplorable monster with a penchant for evil, he's a kid that doesn't know any better, not realizing that the dolls he's playing with are corpses. Within him, though, does lie a monstrosity, a third hand that forcibly stretches from his mouth whenever it wants, and is a major part of the upcoming boss. You start with a Last Giant style hit the leg sequence. The progeny can slam to the ground in a sitting animation to crush you, he can summon fire that explodes after a short period, and he can use his arms and legs to try and swat you away. Initially I thought this would be the whole fight, but after you do a little bit of health, the boss begins to vomit up lava. The entire lower half of the arena is then coated, and you're forced to fight on these 3 higher platforms where the progeny's moveset changes significantly. He'll try to slam you with his hands, ceaseless discharge style. He has an ability to shoot the third hand out of his mouth with 3 different swipes, which you can dodge or parry before countering with your own hits. He has multiple fire magic options, including launching small fireballs that leave little AoEs, as well as larger fireballs that will force you to run to a new platform. I like to switch to my ranged weapons during those moments, giving me a few extra bits of damage as the boss needed to plod on over to the next platform I was standing at. Lastly, he can make the fucking sun explode. The boss's third hand lifts a giant fireball into the air, and you have to hide behind nearby walls to avoid the blast. My issue with this fight, despite its clear effort, is that the boss just hits insanely hard. I found myself dying constantly from 1-shots and 2-shots, which was frustrating because the spurned progeny already has a rather high health pool. He takes a while to kill on your first playthrough, and I couldn't figure out a way to stagger him, meaning I just had to take pot shots and small hits until the fight was over. It went on way too long, which is such a shame because I think this is one of my favorite boss designs in the game. It's so Attack on Titan core, it's so eerie and disturbing, which is perfect for a boss at the end of this flaming, burning capital city. At number 8, we have the Sundered Monarch, the boss of Bramis Castle, and the last proper fight in the Radiance ending before Adir's monologues. He was the king of Mornstead, Bramis, with some of the most in-depth lore that this game has. I'm still wrapping my head around it. I don't quite understand why he went mad, killing those he trusted and even turning on his wife and child. My assumption is that it's part of Adir's will by corrupting the beacons, furthered by how the effigy of Adir is placed directly behind the throne room. Whatever the case, I was expecting a tough fight here. I'd just come from the Imperium and the Judge Cleric boss fight. I fought through Bramis Castle, which was one of the toughest areas in the game. I died multiple times, only to beat the Monarch on my first try. I love how the first few attacks aren't enough to grab his attention. He's groveling by a statue of his wife, proof that he regrets his actions and misses his family. And once you do enough damage to get his attention, he breaks off the head of his wife from the statue and uses it as his main weapon. He has a lot of massive slams which cause outward AoEs. He has a few side swipes that are telegraphed by the red spikes jutting from his arm, and as the fight goes on, he begins to really lean into that arena control energy of his. He summons hosts of flaming swords that fall to the ground around him in various patterns, which are designed to keep the player away from the boss. It's sometimes hard to tell exactly where the next AoE will land, but oh boy, it will come. And I love that these swords are the very same that are impaled upon his back. These are the wounds inflicted upon him by those who stood up against their maddened king, and now he's using them to hurt the player. He also does a lot of damage, so even if his attacks are well telegraphed, 1 or 2 false mistakes can be very costly. I was quite lucky in that I had a poison build from the Hushed Saints set, which meant even while I was avoiding the boss, he was still taking passive damage. But even without this extra help, I think the Sundered Monarch is a very easy fight. He's more in line with a Nashandra than he is with a Soul of Cinder. I just wish Soulslikes would end with their best fights, instead of putting them 70% of the way into the game, because I need that satisfying conclusion to really remember the game fondly. It's why Lies of P really worked, as we have Laxasia, Simon Manus, and Nameless Puppet, who all feel like genuine challenges at the very end. I didn't get that same feeling with the Sundered Monarch here in Lords of the Fallen, and that's what separates him from the rest of the list, where the remaining 7 fights all feel like they nailed what they were going for. At number 7, we have Pieta, she of Blessed Renewal, the first colossal boss of the game, fought on Skyrest Bridge. I won't lie, I think the decision to put Pieta so early in the game was both a benefit and a curse for Lords of the Fallen. The benefit is that she is a really fun opening fight. You have to learn to either parry or sidestep her various melee combos, while then learning to combat her Valkyrie-style second phase where she grows wings, learns some radiant spells, and begins zooming across the battlefield. The downside is that she leaves a really good impression that the boss fights are going to be this cool, with a focus on what I'd consider MMO raid-style attack patterns. That's how Pieta felt for me, only to realize that was not the case after facing the next few major bosses. I love when she grows her wings and her radiant spells become a major focus. She can summon clones of herself which perform certain abilities like rushing across the arena while cutting off movement with light daggers, or casting homing attacks you have to avoid while Pieta is getting ready to attack you herself the moment her clones are done. She has this radiant slam that leads into a larger radiant slam if you stay close by, which is reminiscent of Radagon in Elden Ring. I realized very quickly that if I wanted to beat her, I needed to parry those combos for that extra source of damage, something that I became better at throughout the game, and yet I attribute even attempting it to Pieta's boss fight. I'm glad they didn't hold back in terms of difficulty. Lords of the Fallen felt incredibly easy up to this point, and I needed that little taste of what was to come. I just wish that we could fight Pieta again in a second form, but with a more souped up moveset that feels more scaled for endgame. Foreshadowing! At number 6, we have Tancred, Master of Castigations, and his second form, Reinhold the Immured, found at the bottom of the Tower of Penance. Tancred is a man who loves to torture, though he could never admit it to himself, for he is holier than thou, and believes he's doing all of this for Aureus. But Reinhold knows the truth. The first phase of the fight is against Tancred, and I'll admit, while I was originally very high on his fight due to the genuine difficulty of his moveset that weaves in a ton of radiant spells to keep you on your toes, like radiant lasers, radiant homing missiles, and radiant slams, I found out through research that he is a copy-paste reskin of a previous major boss in the game, the Hushed Saint, with his entire melee moveset using the exact same frame data. And that genuinely kills this first phase for me. I understand reskinning elite enemies or minor encounters, but taking one of the major beacon bosses and then reskinning them for another major beacon boss, it's so disappointing in my eyes, especially as the Hushed Saint and Tancred aren't exactly related in any way. There's no in-game lore reason as to why they would fight the exact same way, aside from them both being hallowed sentinels, so it really comes across as a lazy move. Luckily for Tancred, once you're able to defeat him, his body begins to move on his own, impaling himself with his own weapon and giving over control to Reinhold the Immured. Reinhold is Tancred's brother, though they both inhabit the same body, and this body horror monstrosity is far more ready to beat us down. I like that Tancred's abilities were bathed in radiance, while Reinhold leads into the Inferno, creating magma pools and firing large swathes of flames to try and burn the player to a crisp. On top of this, he has a lot of charge attacks, slam attacks, and various combo mix-ups that you have to avoid to come out on top. I say all that, but I was also able to beat Reinhold on my first attempt of his phase. His visual design is absolutely inspired, alongside some genuinely spine-chilling sound design as his body contorts and his bones shatter with each movement. But ultimately I found his various swipes to be rather easy to avoid. You can stun Reinhold with enough damage, revealing a glowing red core that you can strike for a major attack, but I didn't actually realize that was what had happened and fully messed up my opportunity to strike, a bit embarrassing really. Reinhold made this fight memorable, and had I not discovered Tancred's dirty reskin secret, it might have been a couple entries higher on this list. But while I do support developers reusing assets to make their workload easier, I don't think this was the way to go in this case. At number 5, we have the Hushed Saint, the main boss of the Forsaken Fen. The guardian of the first beacon you come across in-game, this is a big moment for the player. You've fought through the game's resident platforming level in Pilgrim's Perch, and the game's resident swamp level in the Forsaken Fen, and at least in my opinion, the Hushed Saint delivers a fun fight. He starts on horseback, galloping towards the player with the intent to slice us down. Early players of Lords of the Fallen had complaints about the Hushed Saint being on horseback for too long, but as it turns out, it's entirely possible to knock him out of this phase in two separate ways. Either parry his attack, causing him to fall backwards, or peer into the umbral and shatter the umbral roots you can see, which causes a small explosion that can then catch the Saint off guard. Once on the ground, the Saint uses his spear and shield to fight the player, summoning roots with certain slams for extra damage. He can return to his horse at varying points, forcing the player to be cognizant of where they are in the arena via the water that spurts up at the boss's location, and later in the fight, he'll begin diving into the ground and actively attacking you with surprise strikes. Lance attacks, sending his horse to crash into you. I really like this concept. It kinda gives the sense that the Hushed Saint is toying with us, waiting for the right moment to strike, which makes dodging and counter-attacking feel all the more satisfying. You can also tell where he's coming from by the audio design of the fight. If you're wearing headphones, you'll be able to hear the direction he's coming from, which is super cool. And of course, his late game attacks all have a touch of that root AoE flair, with some attacks even able to conjure roots that expand outwards in a circular pattern that you have to dodge through. Given the Hushed Saint is so early in the game, I really feel he makes the most of his moveset to create a battle that is perfectly tuned for the Forsaken Fen, and is one of the more fun fights to replay given the multiple ways you can handle his horse phase. Such a shame they copied his moveset for Tancred, you know? At number 4, we have the Light Reaper, the rival of our main character, who will stop at nothing to obtain the Umbral Lamp. He appears within the opening cutscene of the game, killing the previous lamp bearer, and making it clear that his motivation is to find the new lamp bearer and end their quest for good. In the original version of Lords of the Fallen, he initially attacks you after you defeat Holy Bulwark Otto, but this encounter was patched out of the version I played, which is a shame, as you originally get saved from the fight by the Iron Wayfarer, which makes so much sense with that NPC's character. I always found it odd you just run into him at the next vestige with no introduction. I definitely think it also lessens the impact of the Light Reaper with this change, as by the time you reach his first encounter in the current patch, most players won't remember him from the intro. But then I also have a problem with the Light Reaper's concept in general, as if he wants the lamp, and he wants to kill you for the lamp, does that not mean his goal is useless as you always respawn with the lamp? I also made the mistake of looking at Reddit threads on this topic, and by god, the elitists, they exist no matter the Soulslike, don't they? Back to the boss though, his first appearance is at Fitzroy's Gorge after you cross the Ruiner Bridge. Here, he is too powerful for your character to overcome without prior knowledge, meaning you'll likely dodge a few attacks before ultimately succumbing to his power. He appears again at the end of Fife of the Chill Curse, where you're more familiar with his moveset and you're able to survive for longer. It's entirely possible to kill him here, but so many questlines are tied to his final encounter in Upper Calrath that most players should just opt to let him kill you. His final encounter allows you to finally go to town on this guy, and he's an extremely strong foe. I'd argue of the endgame bosses, he might actually be the toughest, and that's not just because he has an umbral tumor protecting him if you don't destroy it before entering the arena. You can parry his dragon slam attack to knock him off his steed, but I'll admit I was hoping the dragon riding moments would have more varied attack patterns to them. It's always straight line of fire, slam down, straight line of fire, slam down, and then the dragon vanishes. Later into the fight, the Light Reaper summons the dragon while staying on the ground, forcing you to avoid two separate sources of damage, and I think this was a fun concept they didn't do enough with. Lucky for us though, the Light Reaper is an absolute beast in battle, with a host of extremely fast combos that you have to sidestep and block through. He can fire multiple flaming projectiles before coating his entire body in fire for the final phase. I love when he drags his blade along the floor, creating magma pools as he goes, forcing you to keep track of where you are in the arena so you don't accidentally roll into flaming lava. His combo strings get longer and more exciting, and I really did find the sidestep to be vital in keeping myself alive, especially with how tanky his health is. You have to play carefully, which means learning his combos, parrying his attacks, and finally earning that win. Can't say I'm a fan of his final attack though, where once his health bar is fully depleted, he summons his dragon above him and has the dragon dive bomb the ground, causing a Hail Mary explosion. I didn't die to this, but had that killed me, and I had to do that fight again, I might have quit the game there and then. It doesn't matter if it's a Soulsborne game or a Souls-like game, once the health bar runs out, that is sacred. Underhanded tactics may make sense in the lore here, but someone is gonna get caught by that attack, and I pity them. At number 3, we have the Unbroken Promise, fought at the bottom of the Revelation Depths. Very early on in the game, Exacta Dunmire will task the players with hunting down a heretic called Harrower Dervla. She has fallen from the path of the Dark Crusader, and she must be cleansed. The reality is, of course, far more murky. Dervla descended into the Sunless Skein and the Revelation Depths, following a trail that left her feeling hopeless and lost. Her loyalty and her cause wavered until she reached the Chamber of the Martyr, a young boy who has been chained beneath Mornstead, the sole bastion keeping the Putrid Mother at bay. The Putrid Mother is the goddess of Umbral, which aims to feed on anything and everything, and Dervla, seeing the martyr suffering from his role, chose to ease his burden. She would protect him from those who would see him harmed, and in return provide companionship to the lonely boy. Thus, when we arrive in the Revelation Depths, unaware of this, we simply find a knight that we have to slay. This is the Twin Princes of Lords of the Fallen, with Phase 1 focusing on Harrower Dervla and her rather fun fighting style. She's got that massive sword which she will swing around, and you will get hit by it, alongside a crossbow that fires powerful bolts into the ground. I like playing around this ranged weapon as her bolts will stay in place for a few moments before exploding soon after, which makes them more like landmines you need to stay away from, forcing you to dodge towards Dervla to keep up your aggression. Now, this isn't a terribly difficult Phase 1, I found a lot of her attacks easy to dodge, some of them are very simple to parry, and by this point I had a fairly strong weapon that also had poison proc. The scales were tipped in my favour. But difficulty doesn't always matter to me if the boss design is fun and interesting, and Dervla's just fun as hell. Yes, she may look like a mashup of Artorias and Malenia, but sue me, I like Artorias and I like Malenia, so I think I'll like the visual design of a knight that is just their child. Phase 2 is where the fight gets interesting though. Dervla falls, but the Martyr uses powerful magic to fuse their souls, creating the Unbroken Promise, a singular creature with one purpose: slay the Lamp Bearer. In this portion of the fight, the boss gains the insanely cool ability to wield various large nails throughout the boss arena. These can be used to home in on the player, striking down at them with brutal force. They can rotate around the boss, either forcing the player backwards or keeping them in close. Some bolts can attack the player, and this is all while the boss is striking at you with melee attacks to catch you off guard. I love the touch that Dervla's sword has been shattered by Phase 1's fight, now much smaller than it once was, but still just as deadly. Ultimately though, Dervla and the Martyr fall, as their attacks fail to dissuade the Lamp Bearer. I really enjoyed this fight, battling to my very last portion of healing before overcoming the duo to take home the win, it's so good. I got to refight them a second time as well while going for the Umbral ending, and the fight is just as fun. They've got a really solid set of moves, though I can't help but wish that rather than an entirely new moveset for Phase 2, we instead got the powerful nail attacks, but comboed with Dervla's crossbow from Phase 1. That was the most interesting part of her kit, so I was really hoping it would continue through. But still, the Unbroken Promise is an extremely solid fight that shows, yes, just give your boss a cunty armor set, and the good vibes will follow. At number 2, we have Elian the Starved, the final boss of the Umbral ending of the game. To achieve the Umbral ending, players will need to complete a whole fucking laundry list of items that only get more confusing the more you play. Your aim is to feed yourself to the putrid mother in Umbral, releasing her and allowing her to devour the whole world. But to do this, you need parasites to fuel your power, and the final parasite you need is directly within Pieta, for she was originally just an orphan called Eliane. An orphan because, when she was born, she was part of an experiment by Molhu, the Umbral High Priest, and at his behest, we must reclaim that parasite and slay our Pieta. When we soulflay her, the truth of her regenerative powers are revealed. They were never gifted by Aureus, they were an Umbral truth this whole time. Nobody knew, not a soul, but with the Soulflay active, we release that parasite within her, Eliane the Starved. Taking the form of Pieta's wing transformation, but with an alien-like head, she warps us to the bottom of Revelation Depths, where we take part in one of the better gank fights I've seen in a Soulslike. Here she uses the same moveset as Pieta, but adds a host of faster combos and Umbral and Radiant magic to the mix. She can summon her Radiant clones, shoot multiple beams of Umbral energy, and most of her attacks leave a trail of Umbral eyes that will boost your withered health. As such, there's kind of an element of Toho to this fight as you try to avoid her attacks while getting your own hits in. And then she pulls a Pontiff Sullivan. Her main form turns mostly invulnerable, with you needing to defeat a clone she summons, Veracity's Reflection. This clone, alongside Eliane and her Radiant clones, will fill the arena with different combos. I like when the two clones dash across the arena in the final third of the fight, while Eliane charges her laser from afar, giving you multiple danger points to worry about. Defeating the clone though will cause Eliane to be stunned, giving you a chance to hit her with a Grievous Strike. This continues for the entire fight until she goes down, with her aggression and her mix-ups getting more dangerous as her health dwindles. I do think the fight could have a little more scripted consistency, as after I defeated the third clone, it felt like I should have won, but she still had a bit of health left. And I wouldn't have minded if she had a completely different moveset switch up at some point, just to hammer home that she's a super secret boss, as she really does stick with Pieta's first boss moveset, but just stronger and more deadly. Because of this, I can't rank her as my favourite fight, but I do think she is fantastic in her own right and well worth challenging. After all, the only fight you miss out on while doing Umbral is Adir himself, and we've seen how bad his fight is. At number 1, we have Judge Cleric, the Radiant Sentinel, fought at the end of the Empyrean. If there is a moment where the game peaks on a first playthrough, then I would say that moment is the Judge Cleric boss fight. She has been built up as this religious, almost deified figure, a powerful influence in Mournstead. We've heard from her followers, we know that she serves Aureus, and that she believes in what's best for the country, but we also know that the Iron Wayfarer doomed Mournstead by giving the Rune of Adir to Judge Cleric, corrupting her organization from within. Thus, when we discover her at the Empyrean, we're first greeted with a war-torn field, a bit of radiant sunlight, and a woman with long blonde locks that just looks the picture of someone who fights for good. She is devoted to her cause, projecting this image of her during the apex of her power. And I really love this first phase. All of her abilities focus on radiant damage, with her sword imbued with light as she summons thorns to catch the player off guard. It's actually quite interesting imagery, as thorns are inherently violent in their nature, able to prick those who wield them, not something you would expect from the name Cleric or from radiant abilities. She wields the clone magic that many worshippers of Aureus use, allowing her to do devastating combo attacks while charging up her radiant aura. I love when she breaks out the circular rain of arrows, forcing you to keep on your toes and move about the arena, all the while comboing them with AoE attacks like her lasers and thorns. Given how easily I had been mowing through bosses up to this point, to have a fight that genuinely challenged me was a nice change of pace. Then we reach her phase 2. The reveal of the true Judge Cleric as her illusion fades away to showcase just how entrenched in Adir's influence she truly was. It's a really powerful moment. You see how she believes her own words that she's doing this for Aureus, yet she's coated in barbed wire, her sword shattered and held together with the power of Inferno, her armor stained black and her face veiled beneath a crown of thorns. She abandons her radiance, all of her magic now charged with fiery demonic power, the power of Adir. It's a more explosive, less cohesive phase to the fight, as she allows her magic to just run wild, focusing on massive AoEs and thrust attacks, while trying to inflict you with burn to water your health down. It's a phase that demands all of your attention, as should you falter for a moment, you will find a fireball to the face. I especially love her late phase attack where she slams her staff to the floor and begins to conjure explosions around the lamp bearer, forcing us to keep moving to avoid the damage, while also needing to beware of her thrusting follow-up attacks. Without a doubt, Judge Cleric runs this gauntlet of Phase 1 Radiance to Phase 2 Inferno in perfect fashion. Tancred and Reinhold take a fucking seat, becoming the one fight I know I will remember from Lords of the Fallen 2023. It is the best fight in the game, bar none. And that's my list. Which Lords of the Fallen fight is your favorite? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. I want to give a quick shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. It is $4.99 a month. It gets you early access to certain videos, it gets you a shout out in the description and at the end of videos as well, and you gain access to a Dark Souls 3 Soul Level 1 run playthrough. It's a lot of fun. So, I'll see you guys next time. Adios.